Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on our journey, our discussion through the works directed by the great filmmaker and artist whose name is Takeshi Kitano, or Beat Takeshi. And I want to focus, if I may, on that film which was released in 2015, and it is right here, which is Ryuzo to七人の子分たち, or in English, Ryuzo and the Seven Henchmen. This is a film that is in essence about a collection of very interesting individuals, men who are who find themselves perhaps somewhat older in years, and they were former gangsters, or they used to be involved in the Japanese Yakuza or this kind of lifestyle in one form or another. But now, as the years pass, they have gotten somewhat older, and they are now living in a society, in modern Japanese society, where perhaps in one sense they feel like their time is past. But in that, they discover or rediscover a sense of vigor and energy in order to take care of or combat certain circumstances or adversities that come along the way, thus creating the opportunity to come together and have the gang back together again, as it were, for another adventure under this young spirit of the Yakuza and gangster lifestyle that they once knew. And so this forms, I think, the backbone basis for the film Ryuzo and the Seven Henchmen. It's a really interesting film from Kitano in a number of ways, I think. First of all, it is another type of gangster film, quite directly, because these characters are or were involved in this type of lifestyle, but now we find them in modern day Japan, and maybe they are much older now, and so times have changed, or have they? And we see them trying to deal with being older and dealing with the society that treats them like they are old men, and how they have to confront these particular feelings and attitudes that are directed towards them, but also about how they feel about themselves individually, and their own notions of self-worth and self-respect, even though they might be deemed to be these sort of social misfits in this modern-day Japanese society. But in that way, it is a film that is touching upon this Yakuza gangster element, which, as we've seen in Takeshi Kitano films before, his films are often dealing with Yakuza or gangsters of this sort. What's different, or what's unique about this approach, at least in the context of Kitano's filmography, I would suggest, is that we aren't dealing with Yakuza in their prime, as it were, like we have seen in other films like Sonatine or a Brother, or even the Outrage films. But in fact, these are people who arguably are past their prime, and they are trying to, in essence, reclaim this feeling of youth and vigor and excitement back as they might have felt it in the old days, as it were, but now expressed in modern-day Japan, and after some years have passed. So in that sense, we are given a story of this attitude of people who used to be in this lifestyle, but now we find circumstances quite different. So in that way, it's similar to Takeshi Kitano films in the past, but it's also a little bit different. So there's a little bit of a spin on it, which makes it very interesting. It is also an interesting film because it falls in this realm of a comedy, but also It's an action drama comedy. I think it is a film that sets up these characters in a way that makes us go along with the joke, but also they are also the butt of the jokes, as it were. But that's okay too, because that is very common occurrence in the comedic landscape of beat Takeshi films. And this is also made further evident by the fact that, as I suggest, they are social misfits. And so this social misfit categorization, I think, allows itself very nicely for the beat Takeshi comedy aspects to become enveloped in the film. And so there are many aspects where this is a Yakuza film that is also very much a comedy. And we have seen comedy films from beat Takeshi in the past. I think, however, perhaps in the overtly comic films from beat Takeshi's past, like Getting Any or Glory to the Filmmaker, these have been very much akin to the beat Takeshi comedian persona and sketch comedy aspect. Here we're getting a film that feels very much like a Yakuza story, but it's also a comedy and cop and crime drama to a certain extent, and also family drama as well. But there are comic elements that are very much inherently part of the landscape of this film. And so I think it is in that way very similar, and it fits in very comfortably into the landscape of Kitano's filmography, but it also feels like Kitano is doing something a little bit different and a little bit fresh at this stage of his filmography as well. So this film is sitting nicely in the filmography, but it also is doing things slightly differently, I would suggest, which makes it, as I say, very interesting. Also, the way in which we have older characters at the heart of the story allows for further modes of cinematic expression. As I say, this is a Yakuza gangster film to a certain degree, but it is also very much like a Western film in terms of the gathering of the old gang that used to be these iconic heroes from years past, and now they are gathered for one more plan, as it were, one more score, as it were, which feels very much like the old gunslingers of the West coming together for one last hurrah. And I like this aspect of storytelling because it's very much something that we have seen in other Kitano films, I think very interestingly in the film Brother as an example. And so I like this connection that he's making with the Yakuza gangster element and also the Western film. And so it seems like Kitano is very much conscious of the various forms of genre and cinema storytelling that are at disposal when he's telling the story. And I also like how the film, as I mentioned, it is a comedy film, but I also like how it can turn quite abruptly into a very serious and poignant drama that can turn somewhat violent at some places. But even those moments then turn back into comedic moments, then back into these very serious, dramatic moments. And it's really fascinating to see how this film tends to shift back and forth from these various modes. And I'm reminded also of how Takeshi Kitano, in general, presents moments of intensity in his past works. They tend to be moments of sudden bursts of energy, like violence or things of that nature, but are also played in a way that can be said to be comic and humorous. And so I think a similar type of sensibility is at play here in this film, where you have a film that can shift tones quite quickly from the serious and dramatic to the comedic and back again. And I think in particular the serious and dramatic aspects come from the fact of seeing these characters, as I say, dealing with old age, dealing with their family and the particular storylines with some of the characters in particular, and dealing with relationships and how to reclaim something that they feel might be lost, but it's still reclaimable. And so there's a certain level of dramatic poignancy there, while at the same time presenting these scenarios that are very comic and very funny. and also have a payoff of that nature in an emotional point of view and also in a comedic point of view. And so Takeshi Kitano is showing us in this film, like he has in past films, just how well he can balance this line between the dramatic and the funny. And I think that makes this film, again, sit very comfortably in the filmography of Takeshi Kitano. It's a film with a lot of spirit and a lot of attitude and a lot of vigor. And it is funny. It is also a film that seems to be maybe trying to capture the glory days of maybe the old antiquated concept of the Japanese gangster Yakuza film, but it is also saying in a triumphant way that these glory days are glorious because they are glorious and they are fun to work with. So I think there are, and it also gives us room for meditations on age and on family and on our place in society from the viewpoint of these social misfits that are given a lot of attention and care and respect from the filmmaker that is Takeshi Kitano, or Beat Takeshi. So this is the film Ryuzo and the Seven Henchmen. It is it's a very curious film also in how the characters are introduced and the pacing that occurs with respect to the introduction of character and character development. And so this is, I think, something that we have seen in past Kitano works in terms of how well he paces his films through the editing and the various structures of scene development. And it's I think a film also that is very ripe for rewatch as well. So it is a fairly newer film, relatively speaking, in the context of Kitano's filmography, but it is one that I think will have a lot of rewatchability. Plus, it has a great cast filled with a lot of connections to Japanese cinema, and also connections within the universe of Beat Takeshi's filmography. So we're getting a lot of familiar faces, both within the world of Beat Takeshi films and also beyond this, in the general realm of Japanese cinema itself. So in that way, too, this is a great kind of homage or linking back to the foundational roots, if you will, of Japanese cinema that Takeshi Kitano is obviously a well-established part of, undeniably, and quite emphatically so, in a great and spirited and positive way, of course. So in that way, this is a great film to watch, and hopefully you'll be able to catch up with it if you can. This is Ryuzo and the Seven Henchmen. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now, and so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. I really appreciate it. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.